And it's officially kicked off. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the unofficial RPG Limit Break 2022 show. You guys hopefully know me. I'm Ghoul. You two want to introduce yourselves in case anybody, I don't know who would be here that's new, but just in case.
I'm Ozed889.
And I'm the king that is formerly a dead person.
Skimo, and that's Ozzy. You can say hi, Ozzy.
Hi, Ozzy.
So,
That shouldn't have made me chuckle like it did.
it's been a little while since we've had a Limit Break prediction show, just because there hasn't been an event in a couple of years. For better or worse.
It kind of happened, threw things off. Everybody kind of adjusted appropriately. But that said, there was a games list made for that year back in 2019.
We'll get there in a little bit. You're jumping the shark a little.
Jumping the gun. Jumping the shark means that we're talking about, like, Xenoblade the whole stream.
I mean, we could do that too. But
I don't think you would enjoy that, Ghoul. You'd end stream very early. You've played, like, 80% of one and, like, 10% of... or, like, 10% of another.
Well, ironically, it's 10% of one and 80% of two.
Yes.
But
Clearly, that's enough to have an opinion.
yeah. So anyway, actually, it's probably more like 90% of two. I really wasn't far from finishing that game. Regardless, so yeah. So we've got the new submissions are up. As always, we like to review these. But first, we do have a disclaimer on the left that is incredibly important to read. We're not on the games committee. We don't have any direct knowledge of the games list, what the process is, what they do, how they're picking games, anything like that. There is a very, very good chance that we are completely incorrect on everything that we say, and you're just going to have to bear with us because we're idiots. There's 3 idiots in this call. We are self-proclaimed idiots.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot more wiggle room for a variety of reasons. Because there's some picks that, like, I get dead set on with certain marathons. It's less so for this one. It was kind of that way with STDQ as well for a similar reason, but, like, even more so for this one once we get into the whole deferrals conversation.
Yeah, so some other major disclaimers. So GK and I made a full, like, list that we have for our own, like, personal predictions. You know, we like doing that just because it's kind of fun to compare, see who got more right, who got more wrong. But we also, there's a lot of data that we don't have access to. We don't know who is submitting to be a remote runner, who can run in person, anything like that. If it's not on the sheet, we don't have access to it. If someone has a hidden VOD that they used for their submission, we don't have access to it. We don't know what it looks like. The only information we have is what we can find on stuff like SRCom, YouTube, whatever else, personal knowledge from ahead of time, anything like that.
Yeah, there's a handful of speculative things, like if we see somebody submitted from the other side of the world, we have speculation that, you know, they're more likely to be a remote runner, but that's really about it.
Yeah, and then obviously, like, we might know from a couple, like, specific people, like...
Yeah, that honestly didn't really factor that heavily into our decision.
The other thing that is weird is that, as Ozzy was talking about, there was a submissions, a full games list for 2020 that was taken, and I think Limit Break did a very nice thing, and they said, you know, what happened in 2020 was not anybody that submitted's fault, and we're going to go ahead and just defer. If you had a run in 2020 and you resubmit exactly as it was, congratulations, welcome to Limit Break 2022. No questions asked, no nothing like that. You could do it remote, you could do it in person, doesn't matter.
Thankfully, we have such a list of deferrals here so we can actually compare between who did and who did not resubmit.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this over here right now. So this is our list of all the runs from the previous marathon and who submitted. And if it was green, it was resubmitted. Yellow meant it was submitted, but it's a new runner, which is not an automatic re-accept. I think the light yellow is like new category, new runner.
Light yellow is basically same category, different runner. The kind of beige is the game was offered that got in, but it's a different category and a different runner.
What I called beige was, or what I called light yellow was meant to be beige. I don't know. Highlighter yellow was the other one. And then orange was just not reoffered. These runs are just not in. Either for whatever reason, the person just isn't interested in running them anymore. They didn't resubmit. They haven't speedrun in 2 years. Whatever the case may be, those runs weren't resubmitted.
Yeah, the only exception is at the very bottom of the sheet we have a taskbot thing. That was originally a formatting error because we weren't sure how it was going to go because it was a submission for taskbot and taskbot itself didn't offer, but that got squared away. We're pretty sure that's going to be a proper deferral, so we're factoring that in.
Yeah.
That's why that's at the bottom of the list in blue.
So of note, one thing that's a little strange is that means that about half the schedule already spoken for. Congratulations, we are all 50% correct no matter what we do. We could be completely wrong on every other game, and we have half of them right now.
Yeah. Do we wish to talk about any special mentions regarding any game that is in the green?
I was going to say, like, the strange thing about it, at least for me, is that it means that you kind of have to build a schedule to what's already there. Like, the easiest example of, like, kind of an interesting thing is there's already 3 Pokemons re-accepted. Like, if they wanted to do another Pokemon, that's 4 Pokemons, which is very heavy for what they normally do. Things like that. So, like, if you're in Pokemon, you're kind of fighting an uphill battle, for better or worse.
Yeah, there is... I think the only one that I would like to talk about that is a substantial difference that we kind of just don't know is Dragon Quest XI.
To a lesser extent as well, Golden Sun, I will say.
Yes.
But Dragon Quest XI is a much easier example. Why don't you go ahead and kind of explain why, GK?
So Dragon Quest XI, when that was submitted back in 2019, the fastest version of the game was on the Switch. There were glitches that were exclusive to the PC and PS4 versions that weren't available in the special edition on the Switch. That changed when they released the special edition content as like an update for the PC and PS4 versions. So now you have the cutscene skip feature that was previously lacking, but you also have the glitches. So the PC version of that game's estimate is 4 hours and 40 minutes, whereas the old estimate was like 6.5. I think I have that wrong on the sheet there. I'm not going to worry about fixing that too much.
Yeah.
But that's like a 2-hour difference. We're speculating that they'll take PC, but they could take the original Switch one, which is a less glitchy run. Depends on what they want to go for.
Yeah. To a lesser extent as well, Golden Sun Plexa has said that they're okay running either Golden Sun 1 or Golden Sun 2, depending on if the committee has a preference that might have changed in the last couple of years. I don't think that one matters very much. I would assume they would just want to get Golden Sun 1 because it's never been done in the marathon before, but...
And 2 has been done,
Yeah.
so that's the key difference there.
And both games are considered beloved entries, so there's no really wrong choice here.
So, but regardless, it is technically an option. I think most of the other runs are pretty much just resubmitted as is. Maybe one person didn't resubmit for some things that were like originally races or whatever else. But regardless, anything that was on this that was in previously was already in.
Yeah. The only other thing is some names are in red on this sheet. Those are just cases where that particular runner did not submit to be a part of this run. And there's a variety of reasons people would do this. COVID concerns, lack of interest in running the game any further. Just, things happen. 3 years is quite a long time in speedrunning. Some runners, I think, wanted to try to get a different game in that they were a little bit more passionate about recently. Because I know Palmer submitted like 5 games, but he didn't actually submit his deferred run, for example.
Yeah. And then of note, again, we have marked the runs that were offered by a new runner, but we didn't. I know that some of these I didn't also retake, so it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening, because they obviously... We always say the best way of knowing what the committee might do in the future is looking at the past, and clearly if they took these runs in the past, they'll want them again. It's just a matter of, is this the event for it, or with the constraints of between the online, offline thing, the deferral, kind of making the schedule work differently, and again, kind of, I don't want to say forced, but essentially using half of a games list from 2 years ago as your baseline, you kind of have to construct a different schedule, I would think, because it's what you would do given the opportunity today. With that out of the way, I think we kind of should just go from the top of the public submission sheet. I've got it alphabetized. I've got my notes on games that I'm going to talk about, or I think are kind of interesting ones to talk about, and we'll just go for it.
The cool thing about it is the first 2 games are deferrals, so we don't have to talk about them too much. AD&D is a little bit faster than what it was when it was originally submitted. But yeah, we kind of had speculation on both of these games getting in last time, and they did. So
yeah, we've seen them take these classic Western RPGs, a little here, a little there. Usually like 2, maybe even 3 games like this.
Yeah. The nice thing about them is they're short.
Exactly.
These are games that are meant to have like a campaign and then a billion other things you do, and the speedrun is usually just the main campaign.
Or it's even like a case of a game where the campaign bleeds into the next game and you can play them sequentially, and we've seen that as well.
I don't actually have it marked on here. One I did want to talk about was Alundra. That one hasn't been in since 2017, and it's dropped by an hour. This is one of those games that I think Ghoul and I were both in agreement that we felt if they had been running, an event every year up until now, not counting the Questing for Glorious, because I think those are considered differently, then this one would probably be back in consideration at least. But given the lack of 2 years of events and then having only half of a new schedule to work with, kind of left on the table. But I do think that this one can be back in fairly soon.
There's kind of a weird effect where when you don't run events for 2 years, you have like still the same number of events, but things are now spaced out further. So yeah, there is like a weird effect where a lot of games feel out of cycle, but like it's like, oh, it's been 5 years. Like they very easily could go back to a lot of games like this for sure. So
they've always had like a series of like PlayStation 1 RPGs that isn't named Final Fantasy or isn't tied to Square Enix in some way, that they love to take a little here, a little there on occasion.
So, anyways, going on down, the first game that I have a mark on is Astria Ascending. Actually, relatively impressive in the little bit that I saw of it. I'm a little worried. I don't think it had a great casual reception, but it looks great, and it's very easy to follow from a pretty short, relatively short new speedrun.
You have no idea how big it is for a game to be generally easier to follow, because there's a lot of RPGs these days, especially that have been implementing ways to make the game move faster. Like you look at Bravely Default, and it's 4x speed combat. Dragon Quest XI's later ports have that. That's kind of become almost standard, is that you make these games move quickly.
It's a nice quality of life thing that makes it a lot less watchable. Is kind of the.
So if you have something that has a quick something that has quick animations, quick flow of things happening, it's fairly nice. And this one actually was surprisingly good with that. Yes, so as asked in chat, RPG Limit Break is going to be doing a live event on location. There will be a selection of remotely submitted runs, so it is going to be done as a hybrid event.
Yeah, there's definitely a number of games that I know you in particular, Ghost, would love to see get in if it wasn't just for the fact of how fast the combat is.
Oh, yes. Well, there aren't too many of them there aren't any being offered for this event, but that's one of the reasons I've always had apprehensions about, say, the Trails of Cold Steel games, because you press start to skip just about every animation in that game. It's cool if you know the game. It's a little bit harder to follow if you don't.
Yeah, watchability is a pretty important factor in RPGs, because if the player doesn't understand what's going on.
Yeah, and when we say watchability, we don't just mean that the things happen quickly. A big thing is that you want to see cause and effect. You want to see that that the runner's inputs has led to a certain action happening. If you're doing certain actions that you're doing triple-digit damage, and then suddenly you do something that does like a big explosion for like 5-digit damage. That's much more visually impressive than, running up black screen 100 damage, running up black screen 1,000 damage. Oh, something different happened, but I have no idea what.
I blinked. What happened?
One other small thing I will note is that, we kind of talk about a little bit, like we watched a little bit of all these games, and we do have a couple of little shortcuts that I at least like to go through, which is I like to find a cutscene, overworld movement, and combat. That's usually my basis. If all three of them are solid, that's usually a pretty good sign that it'll do relatively well, even to a new observer to the run.
It is a bit of a short form heuristic. I know Plexel in the past has said he watches a lot more than we typically do, for at least for the purpose of this prediction show. And sometimes I can, that'll result in some amount of biases of like, I've watched X person's stream, like full runs this, so I have a full run knowledge as opposed to, maybe I tune into the wrong battle and kind of looking at this. And we do try to give games as much of a fair shake as we can, but we only have so much time. We're 2 weeks ahead of the actual schedule here for a variety of reasons. The game's submissions only closed like a week ago.
I'd expect them to do a much more thorough job on this than we did, for sure.
Yeah, and especially in RPG speedruns where you're kind of expect RPGs to have those moments of dead air moments, even more so than most other speedruns out there. So you do need to actually devote that extra bit of time to just make sure that you just didn't like skip 2 hours into a video only to find a bunch of dead air at random happenstance that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I will say as a very brief aside, when you're submitting games to marathons, this is just advice for anyone. Don't put time for donations in your pitch. That is, as somebody who's organized charity marathons, we expect that unless the run is bang bang, like non-stop, you're probably going to have time to read donations somewhere, or you will find time. So, that just says to me, yeah, there's a lot of downtime. I expect downtime in an RPG, usually.
Yeah.
I say that running several that don't, surprisingly. It's actually sometimes hard to find donation time for certain games, but I try to anyway.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a bonus to say you can talk more while playing a game.
Yeah.
Moving along, we have one of my most wanted runs of the marathon.
You don't say.
I love this series, to an almost unhealthy degree.
Yeah. So if they're gonna take in either of these, I think Ryza 1 over Ryza 2. Ryza 2 is longer, has kind of the same name, and I think more people played the first one, although it is a bit of an infamously hard physical copy to find.
Yeah.
But this series has kind of two, I think, issues historically with its speedruns, where either they're really long or they're really short with not a lot that happens because you skip so much of them because they're like a calendar system or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of them run on you do an action and it takes a certain amount of time system. And they
call it like a Harvest Moon speedrun. You just go to bed every day.
Yeah, so a lot of that ends up being an issue. I don't believe Ryza has that problem. They kind of started doing away with that starting around Shally. And then Ryza again. It's
I know you were really wanting to see Shally.
Shally is one of my most wanted runs in one of these marathons. I adore that video game, and it's one of the games in the series that would work for a speedrun. But I think Ryza should be fine. Again, this is a relatively popular game in the series as well. Kind of got a lot of new eyes on it, in part because Ryza's character design is adorable as heck. Anyways, sliding on down. GK, you had Azure Dreams on your list of games that you thought would get in.
This one's been coming down quite a bit, and I've been seeing this get into all sorts of online marathons. The community for it, and Shawnee in particular, have really pushed it. His time's gotten better and better, and I think the only thing that was really holding this game back for me was the fact that Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was a deferral, and it actually has kind of a similar Mystery Dungeon vibe to it. but like it's short, which is at a premium. Johnny is just a very consistent performer. When he's not busy annoying Ozzy.
Or anybody else who happens to be in the same call with him.
We love you, Shawnee. But yeah, this one just this was kind of like one of my last like takes. It is a little bit on the obscure, a little bit little bit of a weird like subgenre, but they don't have a lot of that kind of game that gets in, so it's a bit of variety. And like I do think the pros outweigh the cons enough for me that I would squeak it in.
Yeah, I do think it's unfortunate that we're probably not going to see probably one of the best benefits of the Azure Dreams is the community is actually pretty substantial and nice people all around, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get. I don't think you're going to get that with a live event showing this year, with given the short time frame, which is just a bit of just a small downside. I would love to see like a proper Azure Dreams community pitch. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, continuing on, Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition is a deferral. That'll be in.
Amazingly, a quarter of the run has been dropped from the estimate, which is spectacular because it's not a very long run.
A game that's been out since the early 2000s. Well, granted, this is the Enhanced Edition, but it's more or less the same.
Continuing on, I quick shout outs to Barkley, Shut Up, and Gem Gaiden. I wouldn't be surprised to see this on the backups, just as a staff backup, since High Spirits is relatively involved with the community now, thanks to the Questing for Glory stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I want to talk about this one. I can't believe somebody actually offered
the new game category for
Windows. Like, this isn't getting in. It's 12 hours of a Japanese run. The game is better than people know it to be because all people know it for is memed 100% category. I don't particularly think it's getting in because it's long. I would probably have a party if it did. And yes, and like the inner Monolith Soft fanboy in me like is rooting this one on.
All right. I guess with the next set of stuff, it's probably good to just talk about Palmer as a whole.
Yeah, can I just give a special shout outs to some of his descriptions of what he's offered?
Palmer might be one of the strangest people I have ever met. And I mean this endearingly and lovingly. He's actually a really cool guy. Like when you meet him, when you hang out with him, he's really cool to talk to. But he is also a person who owns a skunk. He like
holes to ensure he could get said skunk.
I have a running joke that like every third interaction I have with him, I just post this picture of a full coin jar with Palmer did more weird shit. Add a coin to the jar. Yeah, so of these two games, there's Beyond the Beyond and Blue Dragon. Beyond the Beyond is like a Camelot, like obscure PS1 game. Because it's Japanese in 6 hours, I'm not as high on this one as the next run, which is in English and 6 hours.
I'd say I think if we're talking about Palmer as a whole, he offered 5 games, but really probably 2 of them stand out. It's probably either Blue Dragon or Ruined King. Which
yeah,
GK and I have very different opinions on which one is more likely to be in.
Yeah, I can only hope that if they were to take a run of this any length of 6 hours for Palmer, it would be Blue Dragon. This game is perfect for Palmer.
Oh man, I like how his con is people are going to sing Eternity.
You don't say.
Yes. So this game has like one of the greatest, both ironically and unironically, boss themes of all time. The weirdest thing that I think, like, my reservation with this game isn't its length. It's the fact that like this game, ostensibly to a casual viewer who's less familiar with it, would think that this is a Dragon Quest game because the art style is by Akira Toriyama. and it kind of has that same like monster presentation, even though it doesn't have like the iconic slimes. Um,
No, but the artwork, everything else, the design of a lot of just the characters and stuff like that
mhm.
screams Dragon
Yeah.
Quest, Dragon
and
Ball Z.
and music by Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu.
Yeah,
Um,
like this was the game that Microsoft was like, this is how we're gonna get into the Japanese market. We tried.
They really did try at the start of the Xbox. Nearly killed the entire genre. I'm not gonna lie.
not of the fault of the developers.
No,
by the way.
not of the fault of the developers at all. Between
I
this
mean,
and like, I don't know what more Microsoft could have done. They literally bought the third most popular JRPG series and said, "Hey, make your next game exclusive for us," and that wasn't enough to get the market penetration in Japan. So,
yep.
But yeah, I think Blue Dragon would be a really interesting take for sure. I personally think I ended up going with Ruin King, but we can talk about that a little more when we get to it. But would not be surprised to see this one taken at all. Palmer is just super entertaining in general, and this is a game people know of even if they haven't played it. Musashi is a deferral. That is in.
Yep. And really quick, shout outs to the community of this game. They have been pushing this game down. When this was submitted a few years back, the record was 202, and they were knocking on the door of a sub 2 hour run. Now there are, I think, Proto is the sixth to have a sub 2 hour time. So that's really cool. It's been cool to follow it, even as somebody who's only watched runs of this game.
Yeah, it's going to be a great showing because this is, again, one of those kind of like open world 3D Zelda-like games that's going to have a lot of cool, interesting skips and a lot of good development history of the speedrun that you get to experience while watching the run.
Mm-hmm.
Next game
Next game on here is Bug Fables. I submitted this in 2020, back when the glitched run was 2.5 hours. I feel like they would have taken it then. Is part of my reasoning I didn't take this one. I'd love for this to be in the event. I think it's a good run. Even glitchless still has plenty of skips. So this is one that it's like, I'm not predicting it, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that they definitely have it on their radar. Because this game has surprisingly long legs for an indie RPG. Like, there's still crowds of people who are always bringing this one up.
Yeah, it's one of those games that I always hear that people that have played always recommend it, and I'll get around to playing it, I swear.
Mm-hmm. Continuing on, Cat Quest 2 is a deferral, so congrats, Keys. And we got to talk about the Chronos.
Okay, I want to start with Chrono Cross because this might be the biggest sticking point for me. Chrono Cross was taken into RPGLimitBreak 2020. Originally, we had talked about it like being kind of an every 4 to 5 year game, so it had been 4 years. We weren't entirely 100% sure. I don't think we predicted it for 2020, but we did consider it quite heavily. Now it's 2022, and the game has a remake, or not a remake, a remaster. It's not a particularly well-liked one, I understand that, but that still does mean that more attention and more hype towards this particular game has come out within the last, 6 months than had in a very long time.
Yeah, it's like the last time Chrono anything was released was back on the Nintendo DS with Chrono Trigger.
PC version of Trigger, I think, came out a little bit later. But yeah, the only other thing was there was like a crossover between this game and it wasn't like Grand Blue. It was like some big gacha, some second tier big gacha game.
I didn't think it was big. It was just a second tier gacha. But yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Gachas are weirdly big, where you don't think that they'll be successful, and you look them up on Wikipedia, and they're like, they made how much money?
That's just the nature of gachas. You need a couple people to spend $100,000 on you, and you're gonna make a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
But
you gotta get those dopamine addicts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I left this one off. It's the runner here is actually better than one of the two runners that submitted last time in terms of PB. This is a fairly volatile game, so the actual the skill difference between a minute time difference isn't as pronounced as many other games. But the other thing is that and we'll get to this when we get to more into this when we get to Trigger, but there's not a lot of call it the golden age of Final Fantasy, but like the era which tends to be shown at the marathons the most. So like 4 through 10. There's not a lot of that.
I tend to call them keynote games. They're games that, you either would end the marathon with, or, give a really big primetime slot and expect a lot of donations for, things like that. The classic the classic side of Square Enix is relatively light for that compared to what you normally would expect for a marathon like this. And you have a little bit of weirdness again because with the 2 years that the event, didn't happen, we talked about things kind of like almost having a cycle to them where it's like, okay, we're going to do, this Final Fantasy this year, we'll do this long Final Fantasy this year, when we come back around. So a lot of these games kind of start to rotate back into season, but we didn't get a lot of chances at a lot of them. So it's very strange.
Yeah, and we're not going to base this off of anything that was run on this channel that wasn't RPG.
Yeah, if something did really well in Questing for Glory, we'll give it kind of a plus. But but other than that, we're not giving any minuses out for that. So Cross just like, it's kind of in one. I don't know if I would say like maybe it's somewhere between like second and third tier Square, which like I'm pretty sure fourth tier and up Square is like always heavily considered. So like this one is definitely going to be a like serious consideration. It's not a deferral, but it was a game that was submitted, so they have to give this one pretty heavy consideration. And ultimately, it was like the very last thing that I cut for my list, just on the basis of how long it is.
Yeah.
It's still 7 hours. So.
It's still 7 hours, and we also when we last had it, it was a co-op run, which I think I think Chrono Cross actually lends to being a co-op RPG run very well.
Mm-hmm. I think it was going to be a race in 2020 as well, which is another. I don't know if it was a race or a co-op run. I think it was a race, but
regardless, it kind of helps to have a community pitch or something like this when you have 2 runners versus just 1.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the more important facet.
Like the longer the speedrun game is, not having somebody that's on the same kind of like knowledge level with you for such a long period of time really starts the show.
Yeah, and it can be done. I mean, OmniGamer soloed Suikoden 2 in RPG Limit Break 2016 with just a bit of input from Wormtalon on the couch. It was like 90% OmniGamer, and he nailed that run. That's one of my favorite marathon runs ever. So it can be done. We're not trying to say that these things aren't as aren't doable. We are saying that like with more people, you have additional informed couch commentators that you can lean on, and you also, in the event that somebody has to drop, if you had 2 people, then now you'll have 1, but they'll still be able to do the run, which is what happened at Limit Break 2018 with Dragon Quest VIII, where they had, I believe, 2 runners. One had to withdraw not long before the event, and so Ellie did the whole run himself. So
yeah, and I mean, especially with this, with the way things still are, and how close between the submissions and the start of the event, I would not be surprised if something comes up that somebody has to drop out, and they happen to have gotten in a 7-hour speed run.
Yeah, there's going to be a long backup list for this. I'm betting you compared to events past.
Yeah,
I agree.
Out of the Chronos, I went with just taking Trigger. I didn't really think they would do both, and I really wanted Trigger as that big donation push on the last day.
But again, there's not a lot of like big Final Fantasy from that era, so Trigger has kind of always been Final Fantasy 6.5 for marathons. So
yeah.
That ends up being one on there as like a keynote. This will raise a lot of money for donations game.
Yeah. I also wonder how much of it is going to be a case of like, okay, let's say the big show-off run was accepted, but suddenly the guy can't come to the U.S. for whatever reason. Do you allow that person to stream from home to do the run? So there's a lot of these up in the air things. I'm not entirely sure how it could go.
Yeah. We're not really factoring those super heavily into these, but they are a thing to consider with events.
Yeah. Anyways, sliding along, Crystal Project, I have notes. This run actually looks pretty cool. I don't think I ended up taking it eventually, but it's one to keep an eye on. Wouldn't be shocked to see it sneak in.
It's a neat visual style. It's kind of like Minecraft meets I can't remember. It was like a Final Fantasy like 5 or something.
It definitely gives a lot of Final Fantasy V vibes, because it's got a class-based system. And heck, if we were when we were watching the a peek at the run, the guy was running four black mages, which is sounds like a Final Fantasy speedrun party to me. Nuke
Among,
everything.
among indie RPGs in the last couple of years, this is one I've heard talked about more than many. So it is at least something that I'm keeping on my radar and would not be surprised to see get in.
Hmm.
Sliding on through, the next big game that I had a note on was Dead Rising 3. Not gonna lie, I did not think I would see a Dead Rising submission for this one, but
They have a very RPG progression system, even though they're kind of more considered action games. It's on the fringe, but I say this every time. They took Mega Man Network Transmission. They're willing to stretch the definition of what qualifies as a RPG limit break game.
Yeah, I mean the progression system, the nature of just the game itself. The game is primarily get to point A to point B through a massive swarm of zombies, escort people, do fetch quests,
Uh-huh.
protection stuff. Honestly, I think the big downside is that there's nothing else like this on the schedule that could be compared to it.
Mhm.
Like in terms of visuals, goriness, and everything
I think the
else that
violence
series
is a
known
little
for.
bit iffy.
Yeah.
I will
It's
say that the name Ecdysis does help a lot here. You kind of get a marathon proven runner. You really know what you're getting with this, at least.
Mhm.
He can talk for all 3 of these hours here. It's a little bit a little bit iffy though, because like Dead Rising 1 and 2 are the liked games in this series. 3 is kind of the dark sheep, and we don't really talk about 4. So
Because technically, Dead Rising 3 was Dead Rising 5 before or anything else, because they were forced to make essentially Dead Rising 2.1 or 2.2 and stuff, and so on and so forth. So, like, the formula was already starting to show a little, worn out with Dead Rising 3.
And so, like, on the one hand, it does kind of meet one of the goals of Limit Break, which is to show off games that don't normally get in. Dead Rising 1 and 2 have been getting attention from GDQ. They've taken Dead Rising 1, they put 2 on the backup list. So, like, I don't think 3 would ever get into GDQ just because it's long for what it is, and they still haven't taken 2 yet. But there is the possibility with this one. It's so out there, but it's also like worth considering just kind of on that basis. And because, again, as Ghoul mentioned, Ecdysis is like a fantastic marathon performer. You go into a stream, he never stops talking.
Yeah, this is definitely a case where I feel like it is RPG limit break. Longer runs are typically not as frowned upon here than it is at GDQ. So maybe this is a case of just like, I think this speedrun's really cool. I want to show it off, and here's my video. Please watch it. Me showing off this dumb game or something like that.
Continuing on, Divinity Original Sin, that's a deferral, so congrats, Relkun. I always mark this. We have our little server for our prediction stuff, and our server icon, in part because of this game, is Dead Yamcha. This is like one of my most wanted games for the marathon. Just an hour of DBZ abridged memes would be amazing.
This game is basically what you're getting out of this game is on the screen you'll have an RPG, and on the mic you'll just have a bunch of DBZ fans just joking about how weird the sequence of events on the screen is. Like, why is Krillin defeating Frieza, or that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things where what makes it amusing isn't necessarily what's on the screen, although that is like in terms of RPG-ness, although there is still a lot of tricks, at least in the true any percent run, that are kind of hilarious in their own right. But like it has kind of a specific niche to it while also fitting the silly game vibe. And they do have some silly game deferrals. I don't know if they're gonna lean towards trying to make a block of that again, or just stick with what they have, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think the only downside is I consider they haven't taken this over the course of the years that has been submitted. They may just not get the humor and pass it up every time.
They did put the NES Resenjinzo Ningen, the Android game, they did take that as their backup one year. So, because I know of that, I know that they have been watching our show and say, huh, maybe we should consider Dragon Ball Z.
Yes.
Yeah,
So, guys, this is a big clue that we're not on the games committee. This game hasn't been accepted already.
regardless, we're talking a lot about a game. I'd like to see it, but I don't think it's particularly likely to be done. But yeah. Anyway, sliding along. Hi, GK. Moving along. Dragon Quest 11S. This is a deferral. We talked about it a little bit when we talked about deferrals. Dragon Warrior 2, I believe, is also a deferral. So, grats, Sandiner. That's probably going to gatekeep most of the other Dragon Quest games out. It's a series that really doesn't get more than 2 games most of the time. When you factor in the task bot, there's a third.
It's kind of like the downside of the Dragon Quest series, where yes, the series is really popular, but a lot of the games are very, very similar in design, like in gameplay and everything, and very long. There's just not a lot of variety in taking a certain one other than its graphics.
Dungeons and Dragons: Warriors of the Eternal Sun.
Yeah, this was kind of dope. I actually really liked this one when we peeked at it. There's something just kind of cute about Genesis games, like whenever they show up, because there's not a ton of them that really fit the marathon. This game had a great soundtrack. It was a fun watch. I think this has a good, had a good look to it. For 30 minutes, let's go.
Good blend of top-down movement stealth and like dungeon crawling first-person stuff. It takes a lot of those good old Western RPG vibes, and it's got a good soundtrack.
Yeah. So I guess continuing on, Earthbound, the Ancient Cave randomizer was deferred, so that's going to be our Earthbound for the event. So we can keep on going. Shoutouts to Palmer again. Fable Lost Chapters is a deferral, so that's an automatic re-accept. And we get to Final Fantasy as a block. So this is where things get complicated.
Yeah, so we'll start with Final Fantasy 1. There's a deferral for Final Fantasy 1 randomizer, which means I don't think that they'd take Final Fantasy 1 like Pixel Remaster or PSP as a result. They've already done PSP, and the randomizer, like, I think that's just going to take the spot, considering Final Fantasy would thus have been in 5 of the 6 in-person events in some form.
Yeah. The only reason why, for whatever reason, Final Fantasy 1 does really well. Yeah. It just does. It's because of that reason I never want to write off completely them saying no to both the randomizer and just Final Fantasy 1 in some capacity.
Regardless, I said, I think, in general, I think we just all stuck with having the randomizer on our personal list. I keep an eye on it. They just did 2 PSP relatively recently, so I don't think they'll do the Pixel Remaster for 2. 3 NES, that's a deferral, that's an automatic re-accept. They do have both the Pixel Remaster and 3D for 3 as well. It is a different runner, so they can't, like, bump 3 to the full run. They have to do both if they wanted to. But there's such different runs that it's not really a problem.
Yeah, I actually am of the opinion that they're going to take one of those longer 3 runs in addition to the NES one. Because a big part of why they're taking Final Fantasy 3 for the NES, apart from the fact that Zoe already has another run elsewhere in the event, is because 3 is sort of the, like, last Final Fantasy of the main series, not counting the MMOs, because those are kind of awkward to speedrun. But of 1 through 15, every single one, including 10.2, 13.2, 13.3, have been in the event, except 3. So that was kind of the novelty of taking that. And now they have like a full run of 3 that they could probably parlay this off of. Again, it remains to be seen if it'll be the Pixel Remaster or the PC version of what was originally the DS remake. Those runs are a lot safer than they used to be. I'm leaning towards the 3D remake just on the basis that there's not a lot of like 3D looking Final Fantasies, and also that's the first version that most of the Western audience has played.
Yeah. Continuing on our numbers, I've got We'll just go in order of Final Fantasies. 4 had a fair number of pixel remasters. I think if they're gonna do a pixel remaster, it's probably 4. I'm not super sold on either way of this, but it is one to keep an eye on. Our sheet's alphabetical, so 9 shows up next. This one would be in season if we had events continuously running, but we didn't. It is a very long commitment, but it is the one option they have for a longer Final Fantasy run if they wanted to jam it.
The 2 games, if I'm looking for what I would deem to be like a big closer type run or like a Friday night type, we put this in. This raises a lot of donations for a lot of different incentives. The 2 that I looked at are Final Fantasy IX and Chrono Trigger. I went with Trigger because it's a shorter run, and I didn't see like a SNES Final Fantasy I was as high on, but 9 is an option as well. The only thing is they submitted as a race, and I don't think I've ever seen a big marathon end on an incentive-driven race.
Yeah.
So that would be like a Friday kind of thing instead of a Saturday.
Yeah. Mystic Quest is a deferral, so that'll be in.
Yep, Mystic Quest Hundo.
So continuing on, I think I have to go. I guess for real quick, like Worlds Collide and Free Enterprise are both offered. It kind of just went like if they're doing base Final Fantasy randomizer, they've kind of got their FF rando for the event. I don't really think they'll go for that in that situation.
Did we talk about Final Fantasy Adventure?
We did not. Yeah, Final Fantasy Adventure is a deferral, so congrats, Bowie. Looking forward to it. For 7 was in, but it was not reoffered by the original runners, therefore it is not an auto-accept. So they have a couple options. They can do all bosses if they wanted to, or they can try to do a 7 remake intergrade. All of those have strange things about them that make them hard to predict.
Yeah, so Limit Break hasn't really taken New Game Plus runs in the past, and there's kind of an unfortunate stigma, I think, against New Game Plus runs in RPGs. It really depends entirely on the video game itself. There are some, like, they did take Shadow Hearts 2 on the backup list in 2018 before taking the proper any % run the next year. But New Game Plus unfortunately has this thing that, like, until we start seeing New Game Plus runs get into the event as more than an incentive to a run that's already been in, it's hard to predict.
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate stigma too, because I can name 2 games that are on this list of submissions that are New Game Plus and are better for it.
Yeah. So regardless, I think that, like, for personally, I only really would expect the Yuffie DLC from 7 Remake Intergrade, just because it's new game any %. But remains to be seen. Continuing on, we have the Final Fantasy X cutscene remover. They did just do 10, but it's a lot more palatable at about 3.5 hours versus 10. So if they really want, like, the big Final Fantasy name without the big Final Fantasy commitment, that is a way of doing it. I just think with it being done so recently at GDQ and so relatively recently at Limit Break, this probably just takes a backseat for one event. But would not be shocked to see that in. The one bigger Final Fantasy that I do have in mind is 12.
Yeah, Zero Scar is the record in that one, and it's been quite a bit since last time, so there's a lot of new changes for that one.
Yeah, and particularly not the Zodiac Age version where the meme bow exists. This is the classic Final Fantasy 12 on PS2. It's a lot harder. a lot harder.
It's the right version of the run. It's the right runner. And it's been a while. I think the last time they did it was, I want to say, a race. With, was it Hoishin was in that, I want to say? But
there's a co-op with Hoishin and Rusta.
Yeah.
So regardless, I think it's, like, to me, as far as, like, longer Final Fantasy games, I think it feels the best. 13, this is not the same offer, so it's not auto-accept. 15, any % PC is extremely broken. It's potentially one you could get in to sneak in for an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes if you wanted to get just one more big Final Fantasy name in.
Yeah, it's one of those impressively broken runs to watch for people that have played this game, because this is the advent of like, look how big open world and getting to and from places to places is kind of game, right? And you just do insane stuff. You see cool things.
Yeah. So, yeah, if they wanted one more Final Fantasy name, I think that's a decent take. And Kios is, of course, a fantastic entertainer. So, but yeah, that kind of covers a lot of the Final Fantasy. It's a very strange crop, and again, they're locked in on having some specific ones, which kind of changes how things work. So, but yeah. Moving on, we get into the Fire Emblems, and one of the weirder things is there's not a lot of strategy RPGs. There's no Disgaea, there's no Final Fantasy Tactics. There's not really a triangle strategy offer that's not New Game Plus. Like, there's a lot of games that like don't fill this niche very well. So they
popular games that don't fill it, and I think strategy RPGs are one of these things where, because it's a very methodical type of game, a lot of what shows up in the run as a presentation is the routing behind it. It's not as much about execution as outside of like the Game Boy Advance ones, which have, manipulations that, depends on how you move your cursor, that have their own little intrigue. But yeah, a lot of these routes, or a lot of these runs, are driven heavily by their routes.
Yeah.
So I think we were pretty much in agreement that the one we were expecting most was Three Houses. That hasn't been on a limit break. It was originally slated to be in 2020. It's different runners offering this time, but it still has legs. It just had the Three Hopes DLC for Heroes, I think it was, or it's like a new campaign. I don't remember exactly what it is.
It's a brand new Dynasty Warriors game.
Okay. Regardless, the Three Houses brand has expanded enough that people are still talking about this game.
Yeah, it's still relevant. So, I will also note I wouldn't be surprised to see Kirby also doing Shadows of Valencia if they really just wanted to squeeze one more strategy RPG to fill that audience. One thing I said for a long time, I'm really big on data. So I'll look at like YouTube views for past marathons and things like that when I try to make my decisions on what I would like to see and what I expect to do well. And one of the game series that always surprised me was actually Disgaea always does extremely well on the RPGLimitBreak YouTube, which there's no Disgaea offered, so I could see them stretching a little bit more to get just like an extra Fire Emblem or something in to get just a little more strategy RPG into the marathon.
Yeah, there is also on offer of Mystery of the Emblem, which is the third Fire Emblem, and Thracia 776. These were Japan-only games, so I'm kind of leaning towards, probably not, but I do think that they do at least merit some serious consideration, especially with the dearth of, SRPGs in general, and they do have kind of their own iconic qualities in the series in their own right.
Yeah, that's the letter F in the schedule, or submission list.
Yeah.
So many of the big talking points are just starting with F.
I'd say Thracia is also kind of an infamously difficult game as well, so that also helps it quite a bit. Alright. I think that covers the Fire Emblem. Fuga, I have a note for. Just this is another if they want a kind of an indie strategy RPG type. It's a little on the long side, but it's definitely one to kind of keep an eye on.
Game's cute.
Yeah, it's very cute. GK, you're really high on Gauntlet 4. I don't think there's too much to talk about with it. It's just a good watch and it's short.
It's run slaps and it's composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto.
You know that other Sega Genesis game you're talking about? Like this with that? You're good.
Yeah. It's short, it's a popular series, it fits the kind of like arcadey niche. The only thing is, I think this was offered in 2018 and they didn't take it, which I was bummed about. Right. I was bummed about, but I don't think that that's gonna like deter me from wanting to take this again.
Yeah. We talked a little about Golden Sun when we were talking about the deferrals, but base Golden Sun is deferred. It's just a question of if they wanted to change the category. Change to the Lost Age is technically an option. I'd expect them to just stick with base Golden Sun, but that technically is an option. Grandia 3, I have a note for. I don't remember why. I think this is just another.
We were considering this one. Grandia is a fairly big name in that like retro RPG style. The only thing is 3 is the least popular game in the series. They did just get a HD collection, I think in 2020, for the first 2 games. So the name has recognition, but as even mentioned in the pitch, it's kind of the forgotten child of the series. So it's kind of always on that like fringe contender for me. Like I could see this getting into any marathon. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
It's just to see any Grandia game get in, it would be a kind of a win, even if it is not the one that everybody is familiar with.
Continuing on, Happen at Hero, that's a deferral, so congrats to Delwolf. Looking forward to it. Haven, I have a note for. This was actually a decent little watch for kind of an indie 1-hour watch. The combat was a little fast with the fast forward, but you also like went in and out of fast forward, so like you could kind of see skill and tech regardless. I kind of enjoyed my little look at it, but again, it kind of just depends what they're going for their indie, I think.
Hylix 2. This one is weird to me because, like, the first game didn't get into Limit Break, didn't get into GDQ, or not, didn't get into ESA. I don't think it got into any Calithons, and then it wound up at GDQ. And then I've seen Hylix 2 runs. It is a much more well-constructed game, I think, than the first one. It's kind of one of those things where, like, I don't find this run as entertaining, but, like, there's things in it that are so just surreal that there's definitely an audience for it that just is like, this game is just visually captivating. Like, what on earth am I watching?
That's the only concern I have with it, is that I can see where some people can be captivated by it, but then there's people like me where I look at it and I'm just so completely turned off, I just turn the channel.
It's a surreal art style that's like out of, 1950s surrealist paintings.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't work for me, and on top of that, as a speedrun, it goes in a speedrun, I can't, like, soak it in myself.
The animations of this game are... Your movement on the overworld is your character's floating in the air on his torso and then, like, spinning. It's kind of a thing you have to see for it to be believed.
It's a strange one.
Now moving on to we'll talk about the Neptunias.
This is the first time I've seen a Neptunia and thought I actually would not mind seeing this. I didn't mind what I was watching with Sisters versus Sisters. Because it's
something we all agreed upon, actually.
Because it's an action RPG. It's the first Neptunia game where Neptunia is one of those series that, a lot like Trails, where I've always had an issue watching it where you would do the input for the command, and a number would appear over your enemy's head, and that would be it. There would be no context as to what happened, what your attack was, what you were doing, and you could menu and do things. So it's one of those games that was almost too fast for its own good, which is a really stupid sentence to be able to say about an RPG speedrun, but a lot of the point of a charity marathon is watchability. You need to be able to watch the game, understand what's happening, and explain it. Because this is an action RPG, it didn't have that issue. It was actually a very palatable watch, and for some reason, this series does have its fans. I don't know why. I say that jokingly. I don't mean that like negatively. I just always like making fun of Compile Heart.
So the kind of thing with this series is its fan base is usually more driven by the characters and the goofy story and world than they are by the gameplay itself. So that's one of the things that unfortunately, like, it doesn't translate to a speed run necessarily a lot of the time. So it's been held back. I don't think any GDQ has taken it. I'm not even sure if it's been on a hotfix, although that could just be nobody's offering it. It's one of the games was in a Questing for Glory, but that Questing for Glory, I'm pretty sure 60% of the submitted hours got into the event. So it's not necessarily like indicative of too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could finally see this in the event, and I would not be shocked. Although, like, I do know that there are some weird content concerns with certain games in this series. I don't know enough about the series to say what, though. So
yeah. The only thing I can say based off what I watched this run was that it is by far the most watchable out of the Neptunia games we've seen offered for this event. But at the same time, it is still a very simplistic action RPG. I don't know how much of that can last that 3 hours.
Again, we don't take 3 hours out of our time to watch every single run. So
So anyways, we're into the Kingdom Hearts, which is another one of the big Square Enix series that tends to be a pretty important moneymaker for them.
yeah, there's a lot in this series that I think cool. How many do you have for this?
I have 4.
Yeah,
See,
so
that's
again,
what I was expecting to hear.
I
So
have
first
3
things first,
myself.
we'll get the easy one out of the way. Kingdom Hearts, Birth by Sleep, all stories. Congrats. That's in.
That's a deferral.
Yeah, deferral, no ifs, ands, no or buts. We will be seeing that. Then we have approximately a gazillion other interesting to good offers. I think the ones that really stuck out for me were Chain of Memories, Riku's Story, Final Mix, any percent in some form, probably Proud. 2FM Rando by 2 very strong players, and then there's also a 3 offer, and 3 has never been in the marathon. Shockingly.
Even despite your any misgivings about popularity and issues of 3, it's still Kingdom Hearts that hasn't been in the event, and we know RPGLimitBreak stick.
Oh no, they've been dying. It's got the Metroid problem. They were dying for new numbered Kingdom Hearts games, or just new Kingdom Hearts in general. They would have taken a 358.
Yeah, that actually, now that I think about it, there is one new game plus, big new game plus that they have taken at RPG Limit Break, and that was Dream Drop Distance.
Yep.
Like,
So it's definitely interesting. Strangely enough, the only game that I didn't take was Kingdom Hearts 3.
Why?
That one's on mine. The only reservation with them taking Kingdom Hearts 3 is that the runner is Etchy, who has a deferred run as well of Pokemon Sword, which is a fairly long run, so we don't know if they're going to give him 3 hours of Kingdom Hearts 3 and Pokemon. I have it on my own personal list because, as mentioned, like, there's not a lot of Final Fantasy, so I think they're going to lean towards other big Square in terms of like Chrono and Kingdom Hearts to kind of, pull in donations from that audience. And 3 has not been in.
It's just not just Square, it's Disney, and that's a big deal.
It's not even just that. It has its own specific fan base too. It's like it has some crossover with the Final Fantasy crowd because that's how a lot of people got into those games, was they like Final Fantasy. It's Disney, but like it also has like its just own fan base from its big established. I want to say cinematic universe, but I'm not sure what you would call.
It's got its own lore.
It really just depends on how really bits to get the KH3 in that they're willing to do that. Mm-hmm. And I if it was me, I'd be salivating.
It's just hard because, I mean, the Chain of Memories category is brand new. It's never been done. Final Mix is by, I believe, the best runner in the world, and it's only 2 hours now. This game used to be 3 hours minimum for this run, if not more. So, like, you've got, like, pure gas there. They haven't done 2FM Rando, which is basically the thing that's, like, really re-pushing Kingdom Hearts 2, which was already the biggest game on the channel, debatably. Mm-hmm. So, it's like, there's so much, like, when they're kind of in a weird spot for Final Fantasies and they've got so much gas in this section, really makes you kind of question what they'll end up going with. So, I ended up kind of... Like I said, personally, I had both them. I had Chain of Memories, Final Mix, and 2FM Rando. Could easily see them swapping any of those, putting in Kingdom Hearts 3, doing just Kingdom Hearts 3, and one of the other. Like, it's... You can go a lot of ways with this one, and I don't think you would be wrong for predicting it.
Nearly every Kingdom Hearts offer is viable, in my opinion.
Well, they're not as viable. They're pretty much strong.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of, this is a popular game run by a top 10 runner, time wise, that has, maybe that particular thing hasn't been shown, if not having been shown at all, that hasn't been shown in a while. I leaned away from Kingdom Hearts 1 on the basis that it was in the last Limit Break. 2 is still like the big hitter in the series on the Limit Break channel, so Rando was like one of my last cuts. I took 3 because, again, this seems like the one that they're fighting, that they really would want to have, and with the announcement of 4, there is renewed interest in 3. And then Chain of Memories because Riku's Story has just not been offered ever. Like Ghost Wheel did Sora in 20.
Yeah. And that's not because Riku's deck is predefined. There is no customization or strategy. You just play the character. Got that story.
It's a different run, for sure. It's. I will say, if you want to get into Limit Break 2023, start ordering 358 over 2. They're just dying for new games in this series. Anyways, I think that pretty much covers the Kingdom Hearts section. Definitely, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. Then we have Kodelka. I have noted as an interesting one. Just a lot of offers for this game. It's technically in the Shadow Hearts franchise. They've snuck in one of these pretty consistently. It's also relatively short.
Yeah, this is like one of those PlayStation 1 games that looks extremely PlayStation 1, and then that has its own inherent charm. This is something that, if it was any other year, this would get in. I just don't think it's that year.
Yeah, I mean, there's tough competition all around when half the spots are already reserved. There is one thing. There's an offer of PAL and an offer of NTSC. We took the better time of NTSC, even though the estimate's a little longer for that one. But, we could see either one of those. And this game just, like, I've seen this in the last couple of years just get on all sorts of marathons. It's been on, I think, multiple GDQ hotfixes. It was in Questing for Glory. It's been just... I think there was a Shadow Hearts marathon this got into on the Limit Break channel within the last few years. I've just seen it in quite a few places that I think this would just kind of logically be its next step.
Mm-hmm.
So, sliding on further, we have Langrisser 1 and 2 by Lady Starbird, I have noted. Again, if they wanted to I believe this is another strategy RPG, so if they wanted to kind of try to shore up that a little bit, this is a pretty solid way of getting an easy bidding war for it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that it's a 25-minute difference, but that's pretty easily fixable. There's a lot of ways you can kill.
Look at Ghoul cheating on his sheet over here. Putting the shorter estimate of the two in for the bid war, not the longer.
You do what you have to sometimes.
Oh, fuck. There, I got my F-bomb in.
Something to mention, so I guess sliding along, Legend of Mana. There's a decent amount of mana offered, but the one that got in last time was Secret of Mana on SNES, which was not reoffered. This just got remastered. It's got a giant community pitch. I think it's pretty likely Legend of Mana is in some form. I don't know if you do a bidding war for this because there's so many different runners for it in different categories. I'd be curious to see how they handle it. I just would be shocked to see this not in some form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a pretty safe assumption on your part, Goal. Especially with the remaster or the renewed interest in the series. Like over the course of 5 years, this game, the Mana series has just had this life breathed back into it.
Well, they'd had the whole 1, 2, 3 collection. They had the Trials of Mana remake, which we'll discuss a little bit later.
Yeah.
They had the Secret of Mana remake was 2018, and there was this HD remaster of Legend. The number one thing that says to me that this is probably in is the volume of names offering, because when I see a submission of a game, when I see a game submitted with 6 links on the on the page here, on the submissions page, that says to me that there is a community that really wants to get this in.
Yeah.
That definitely props it up quite a bit. So it's just hard to reject that many people submitting a game. Sliding along, just a quick note, Live Alive really, I think it'd been out for 2 days when submissions ended, so I just wouldn't expect this to get in based on that alone.
Yeah, I'm expecting this to have the Saga Frontier kind of situation where it's going to be individual stories rather than the full game, unless the full game is like 5-ish hours after all the new stuff makes it faster, if it does.
We'll see. It's a discussion for 2023.
Exactly.
Loom is a deferral. That's an auto re-accept. I have a note on Ancient Cave. Basically, just never write this off. It's 2 hours. It's entertaining, and you get fantastic music and great commentary. So I don't think there's too much to say. We've all seen Ancient Cave at this point, I hope.
Oh god, not that one.
Maka Maka, if they're doing a silly block, this is one of, I think, the 2 or 3 viable offers they could do to really put like a keynote silly game in.
Yeah, by that meaning like a longer, especially like I wouldn't say notorious because like not very many people have heard of this game in the West because the other one probably is more notorious, but this game is this game's a fever dream, and it is one of the most surreal and funny games I've ever seen.
Yeah, I will
it's
say
Japanese only, but DeWolf basically reads the script.
He is the script. You don't have anything else. It's all in Japanese, and look, like it's like one of those things. Like even if this game was translated, you'd still need a translator. I'm sorry.
I will say the one downside of this run is that this is essentially a New Game Plus run. Like, it's just showcasing... The main purpose of this run isn't the speed run, it's showcasing how bizarre this video game is and that it exists. Is that good enough to get it in? I don't know. But it is one to consider and to think about. Manamon, this was a deferral. Really excited for this one. Super cool take. Definitely not one to be missed. Mario & Luigi Dream Team, this is a foreign offer. Just a note. Usually it's always fun when you get a Japanese offer. Mario as a whole, I think, is going to get kind of crowded out in other areas. Mass Effect. I have Sanjan doing Mass Effect 1. I think that seems pretty solid.
I do too. I've talked to Alec. The one bit of sensitive content with this game, I think there is a workaround, in which case I could probably talk to the runner about that in particular. But beyond that, like, every time I've seen this game on the Limit Break channel, it's been on, I think, 2 or 3 times. It's just, chat is full of people like, I love this game, I have such good memories of this game, and that is what you want to go for with the Limit Break run. It's a popular game, it still has enough of the RPG elements in the run that I think it carries over, and like the fan base for this series is like perhaps the most diehard of like any Western RPG besides like Elder Scrolls.
Mass Effect 1 and 2 is arguably the biggest Western RPG duology of all time.
That's with Mass Effect 1's like faults, right? But every person who has loved this series will always say it peaked with Mass Effect 2, and it's probably their favorite game.
Yeah.
The run is actually pretty cool visually, like in terms of like how you move around and use your abilities. That's really, really fun to watch.
It's also, this run has historically been like an hour 55 estimate. They've cut off a lot of time with this one. So is that enough to get it in the event? We'll see. But I also want to say fingers crossed for this one.
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out, like I said earlier, this is one of those cases where New Game Plus helps the run immensely in terms of watchability. Because it's not just a case of like, oh, you New Game Plus, you have all the overpowered broken stuff. No, things still die pretty quick if you're good enough in Mass Effect 2, regardless if you're level 1 or not. It's just cooldowns are shorter, and you're allowed to do skips faster and stuff like that. It's really all New Game Plus really does for Mass Effect 2. Great watch.
Yeah, it could be either of those. 2 is a little bit more guns focused and less RPG focused, but like how that translates to the run,
I don't think that matters at all. It's an RPG. It fits the marathon. People love the game.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I'm leaning towards 1. They could do 2 here as well.
Yeah.
Battle Networks.
Yeah, so this is a series that I always say that like Battle Network is one of the reasons Limit Break exists, because it's kind of a series that just kept getting crowded out of GDQs. And weirdly, it's a complicated situation here. So 2 was in the event originally, but was not reoffered by the same runner. And this time it's offered by Kizaron, who already has 2 runs in the event.
Yeah.
Which they've wanted to get 2 in for a while, I feel like, but it's really hard. But like, I know that like it's not necessarily fair because one of those runs is co-op and the other run is an hour, but like you really don't want to give one person 3 runs if you can help it. Like it almost just gets overwhelming for the person at that point.
Yeah, I also think this might be just the one year that Mega Man Battle Network just does not get seen.
They have had 1 year where they didn't take any of them. It is funny you say that, given that I have done 3 runs. One of them was a 30-minute, and the other 2 were co-op. So it is a different situation there.
Yeah. No. Again,
But
it's
it is a lot for asking one person. It would be solo running 2 and then racing a third.
yeah. So and again, if anybody can do it, it's Keys. But I feel like just for Keys' like almost for Keys' sake as much as anything else, they would do 6 if they're doing it. 6 is a very well liked game. I believe this was also already done on the channel, so.
It hasn't been a long time. It was like 2016. The weird thing about the weird thing about this series is, apart from the main events, it doesn't really show up on the Limit Break channel a lot. Team Battle Network does their own events. They actually did an event on the Limit Break channel many years ago that they put the VODs on their own channel rather than Limit Breaks, I believe. But this one, it's been long enough that it's been out of. It's kind of like it's kind of fresh again.
Yeah, back in rotation, as we would call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is a series of a diehard fan base, and they did announce the Legacy Collection.
Yep.
So finally, like, renewed interest in Battle Network.
Which they somehow did not put NetPlay in.
I blame Mega Man Battle Network 4 and its cartridge bricking glitch for that.
Shut up the network transmission every time.
Continuing on, Monster Sanctuary is a cool video game. Mother's a complicated one to talk about. I still think that we're kind of all in agreement that we're waiting on some kind of an official release for Mother 3, if that was ever to get in. I wouldn't be, like, totally shocked to see it ever sneak in, but it's not one I'm going to predict. They've done Mother 1, and they've got the Earthbound Ancient Cave, so they're not really hurting to sneak in Mother in some form, so I think
every year this game gets offered.
Yeah. Neo Twiwi, fantastic game, way too long, unfortunately. If they could patch out the what's it called? Maybe, but until then, we're gonna have to cry a little bit about it. Nier is a complicated situation just because they took it once and then it got kind of removed for charity concerns. I don't know if those.
It's so weird to me because, like, the rumors that I had heard at the time, like, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then I played the game and I'm like, I don't quite see this. Like,
yeah, I wonder if that's just like there was less understanding of the game at the time. I'd never heard of Nier until like submissions like on that one. It just wasn't a very big series at the time.
I mean, it was one game.
Yeah, it was one game. Like Nier Automata really kind of pushed it back into, or pushed it into the spotlight as like the new in game, basically like the modern Earthbound in a way.
It's weird because it's like they're so different, but yet they're so similar in very strange ways.
So I think that helps it potentially. Again, I don't know if they've resolved that. I'm probably not going to pick it ever to get it in just based on that history alone. And that might also just be a misunderstanding of what happened in the past. You kind of hear things, from here and there, but
yeah,
we'll see.
On that note, there's another name on here I have to quickly mention, which is Omori, which got into GDQ. This is a game that, like, I think it's 1 million sellers, so it is pretty successful. It's not on like the gargantuan level that something like Undertale is, but for an indie RPG, it is really popular. The biggest concern is content. Any percent glitch does not do the best ending of this game, and there is content in this game that definitely raises concerns when your charity is Nami.
Yes.
Because if it wasn't for that, I would be like, if the charity was Doctors Without Borders, I would be like all in on this submission. But the specific concern with the charity, which is something that Limit Break committee will discuss, and if they decide that there is a way to make it work, then I would absolutely not be shocked to see it get in. But that concern is the main reason why I don't have it on my list.
Yeah. Octopath Traveler. We've said this in our private talks that we think Octopath Traveler ship has sailed a little bit at this point. Like, this game is how old now?
4 years. This got into 2019 when it was at around its peak, and It did have a good showing at ESA with the Galdera run. Like, there's enough people that know this game and like this game. If I was going to lean towards one category, I would pick actually the single story bid war, which is something that I think pretty much every event wanted from the get-go for this game. Was you have 8 characters, you do 1 hour, and you see who's the most popular.
Yep.
Yep.
Uh,
I mean, yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's too much more to say. Like, it's one that could be definitely sneak in, because it's also just short and it has the Square Enix logo on it, which is always a nice help. Well, specifically the Square Enix logo while being promoted by Nintendo, because Square doesn't market their own games. But continuing on, we got our papes. Personally, I don't have any of these particular papes. I think GK and I are both kind of leaning towards Super Pape. Just, it's the one pape that's really not been shown anywhere. It's actually kind of the last super well liked Paper Mario in a way, like casually, like it's.
It's not the ultra diehard of TTYD, but I would say probably 85% of the people who really like TTYD also really like Super Pape, and the Super Pape's also the best-selling game in the series. So
yeah,
Paper Mario 1 has a randomizer, very good randomizer. I don't think they've had normalized kind of what the settings are for it, so that kind of gets edged out by all the other randomizers, especially the deferrals. I'd love to see that one get submitted at a later point, though.
Yeah, I think that really what you would wait for on that one is it's kind of the same issue that happened with Zooter and KH2 Rando, where it's like it'll be in the future at some point, but you really need to like figure out what the good community rule set is, what makes the length take the right amount of time. And that stuff just takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes probably about a year for the rando to start settling in, finding out, all right, we're going to have this amount of settings that are going to make the games, short enough where it's doable in one sitting and easier to follow, whatever the case may be. But Phantasy Star 2, I believe, is a deferral. Yes, it was. I believe it's Bic that has it, so congrats.
Looking forward to seeing you, Bic.
Yeah, that's been a run I've been excited to see for a while. It's just kind of a super famous game. It's very glitched.
I mean, we got our Sega Genesis lined up all squared. It sounds great to me.
Yeah. We get to the Pokemons. I am so sorry if you offered Pokemon to this event.
Yeah, because my God, we have 3 Pokemon deferrals, and now we have how many more on this table?
Yeah, the thing with the deferrals too is it's like the deferrals are broke. You have Crystal Randomizer, which is Crystal is evergreen. Like that's always gonna have an audience. You have Sword and Shield, which the weird thing to say about Sword and Shield is from late, God, that game dropped in what, 2019?
Yeah.
Like, so early 2020 was kind of like the peak for this game, and then it kind of fizzled out for a while. Right when the event is going to happen is probably the best time to do Sword and Shield after like 2020, because it's just before the release of Scarlet Violet. Mr. Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, I was probably one of the people hardest pushing Limit Break to like take this that wasn't affiliated with the committee, because like it's still, I think, the 10th most watched video on their frickin' on their channel, like, period. Like, edging out every single it is the most watched run on the Limit Break channel, was when we took this for an online event of any game that was not in RPG Limit Break itself. So, like, it is unfortunate that the remake that came out in 2020, that's kind of sailed, but this is a series that has like a diehard, relatively evergreen fan base, so I don't think it's going to fall off too much between then and now. So that's 3 runs: Game Boy Advance, DS, and Switch. So
yeah, honestly, the Mystery Dungeon fan base is so diehard they'll go through some of the worst releases and still stick by.
I do think there's a good chance they try to sneak in one more Pokemon, just given how much better it's been performing at GDQ of late, the amount of money it raises. They got a lot of options, I'll be honest.
The strange thing is GDQ was hesitant to take Pokemon more than once in events, even like missed a couple events. for the longest time, because it wasn't a huge donation raiser, and then summer of 2019 they took 2 Pokemon. Up until that point, it was starting to get steam, but in summer of 2019, which happened after the last in-person limit break, Pokemon at GDQ was like the thing to see for that event. Like every Pokemon run raises like twice as much as like the next biggest thing that's not on the last day. So if they're looking to pick up steam, they could pick up a 4th one, and there's a lot.
There's a
like,
lot of really good options. So again, I think Arceus sticks out to me. This is probably the most well-liked casual Pokemon since Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Graphics complainers aside. There's also the option they've never done base red on the channel, believe it or not.
Yep.
That's
They do that for requesting for glory, and that again, 60% of the hours submitted to that probably got in.
Yeah. The only thing I'm worried is that they're gonna feel like that if they don't do Legends Arceus now, then they're going to be missing an opportunity as the next. Because Pokemon is always a franchise that's moving forward, and rarely does going back a generation do anything.
The strange one for me that I was actually leaning into was Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. That one was one of my latest cuts. Just on the basis of top level runners, Gen 3, I think they've only ever done once, and it was original Sapphire of 2017. So for whatever reason, I was gravitating towards that one. Just like Legends Arceus, I think T-Pat's time wasn't as high as I would have expected. He has record in Brilliant Diamond glitchless, so I could see that one getting in. Although it did just show up at GDQ, and it is a remake. It is a remake that's, it's probably the least highly regarded remake of the bunch. So there's a lot of like pros cons to these, but there's like the pro will always be Pokemon. So
yeah, the only other reason I'll say Arceus has a decent shot is this way you have another kind of like very very visually different type of Pokemon game on your marathon schedule.
Yeah, it's definitely a different game. I think Shining Pearl glitched as well. Like if you wanted just 22 minutes, it would be a pretty easy like bonus run or incentive to sneak in as well. One game I really want to see in, I just don't like the pitch for as much, is the trading card game. I really think you need like a specific cadence for this game. I don't think it'll be a great race for the event. I think you need kind of like almost like a walkthrough speed run where like you say I'm gonna mash at 5 hertz so that the game doesn't flash as badly, and people can kind of follow what's happening.
A lot of blinking white screens. Either that, or you would specifically run with. There does exist a mod that fixes that problem. Thanks, Tonic.
Yeah. So like, there's options for it, but like until that, like I said, until one of those two ends up happening, like, there could be some really fun stuff. Like I've been saying, like it'd be fun to do a race of like. If you ever did a race of it, have a race to be the first person to open Charizard would be hilarious. Like out of like the packs in the game, and just like open packs.
I mean, to be fair, you start off with a Charizard deck.
Yes, but you still open packs. Like
yeah,
you know, and like these there's a massive resurgence in the Pokemon TCG in early 2020. So
yeah, I think the ultimate thing I would say here is, I don't predict this getting into this event, but like anyone who offers, and this goes true for any Pokemon, but that also does include trading card game. Submit it next event if it doesn't get into this one, because there's always room for Pokemon.
It's a rough submissions period this time for it, unfortunately, just given the circumstances. Continuing on, Quest 64 is a deferral. That is in. Ruin King, we talked a bit about with Palmer. I like this for Palmer. Just it's a little shorter. It's a different look. It's a newer game. They kind of like sneaking those in when they can. I don't think it'll be more relevant any other time. That said, I also wouldn't be surprised to see Blue Dragon happen. This game is a lot more broken. They're just different runs. I just like Palmer for 3.5 or for 3 hours or 4 hours almost, I guess. And continuing, Secret of Mana. Most notable thing here is, again, they did have Secret of Mana in before, but it was the SNES version and it was co-op.
Yeah, this one I feel like the time to take this, like the optimal time in terms of attention, would have been like 2019, because the remake was like well liked when it came out, but it hasn't had like super long legs in terms of being talked about among the great remakes. but it's still Secret of Mana. Like any issues people have aside, it's still a very popular retro game. It's kind of a new skin for it. He did gloss over Saga Frontier. That this one always seems to get into the event in some form. There's always the character bid wars, which are super short. And they did just have a remaster. They're not going to be running the remaster because I believe the remaster is like way more busted. But it does mean that the game has some new light. Although I probably could say that for like 20 Square games because they've been remastering games like clockwork for the last 2 years.
Yeah, they've
better or
been
worse.
pumping them out.
Yeah. Get into my favorite section, which is SMT. It's a normal SMT problem. The runs are fantastic. The runners are fantastic. The length is not fantastic. These are long games. I think with the schedule already being half filled, it's a lot harder because a lot of these are kind of build arounds. You have to kind of have the right set of circumstances to sneak them in.
Yeah, what was the last SMT snuck in?
Digital Devil Saga.
DDS
Oh,
by
would you
Pajamas.
look at that? Digital Devil Saga 2! They complete the series.
He's making fun of me a little bit because I think it's viable they could do DDS 2. I would much rather go 2.5 hours longer and just do Nocturne. Get the big PS2 one out of the way. But again, it's a lot harder to sneak in. The pitch in favor of these, I will say, by community marathons, the SMT marathon is consistently the best performing community marathon on the YouTube channel. So the numbers are there to support it. It's just a matter of can they actually get these in. I don't know.
Yeah, five actually broke 1 million sales within a month, I believe. Like SMT 5, it's carrying the Persona. It's riding Persona's coattails in terms of like popularity because it is the father series to that, and it's been successful in its own right. I didn't predict 5 on the basis of the runner is Beef, and Beef already has a deferred run, which it's a lot to ask for a deferred run of a 4.5-hour game if it's co-op, and an 8-hour solo run. But again, it's a really popular series. I would love to see Nocturne. That was a surprisingly late cut for me. I do think Limit Break still wants to take a run over 6 hours, even though I didn't necessarily predict any in particular.
Yeah.
DDS 2, if they want to finish that off. I know DDS 2 wasn't as popular as the first one, and like it's not the biggest name in the SMT series, so it's a bit weird to go for it as like a litmus test kind of deal. But if you just want to take them, they're not bad runs, and Pulse has been doing very good with marathons.
Honestly, I just, even despite the deferral, if they were to, in my opinion, if they're going to take an SMT game, they would take SMT 5 despite the deferral, just to have that. I think that if I were them, I would just say, if we're going to take an SMT game, we might as well take the one we really, really want. And unfortunately,
I think
that is not called Nocturne.
It is called Nocturne.
It is called Nocturne.
It is called Nocturne.
5 and Nocturne are like 5 has the newness and the sales, but Nocturne has like the
Nocturne
legacy,
is,
and for a charity marathon, legacy is huge. When the 30-somethings that watch this marathon and are a huge fan of this game and have built up income donate.
Yeah, you want the prestige of Nocturne.
I think you're overvaluing the prestige of Nocturne just a little too much here. I think they're gonna value.
We have a halo effect around this entire series. We want Limit Break to take these more often. Period.
Yeah. No, I would love to see all these SMT games eventually. This is my personal view.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's fine. Shining Force. I think I actually have CD on my list as well. It was a backup for 1 year, and again, the lack of strategy RPGs gives this one a bit of a boost. So Shining Force CD, Langrisser.
I wouldn't even be surprised to see 2 either. 2 hasn't been done in a long time, and it is the most popular game in the series by far. It is RNG manipulated now, but regardless, it's been a long time, and the run is still solid. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's Ty. He is the Shining Force runner, as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm. Him and Ski Soccer, I believe.
Shoutouts to my good friend Cruncha, by the way, who still is my introduction to the series. It wasn't even Bowie. I did not know Shining Force existed until Cruncha randomly did a speedrun of it. But
okay, cool, interesting.
So Sonic Chronicles, by the way, is the other kind of offer for a silly game. I don't like it because it's not visually silly. It's just kind of
a mediocre game that happened to be developed by BioWare
and
that
have the Sonic license.
It has a Sonic license. Has a decently organic script, a weird gameplay system, and like 3 tracks that regularly go into the lists of top worst video game music of all time.
It only hurts because Sonic is known for its great music.
It's got a couple of stinkers. Shout out to Spinball.
Okay, that's options music. That's not really music. That's more like just like.
By the way,
rare.
Even more than that, shout outs to that getting put on vinyl.
Oh man, they put Sonic Spinball music on vinyl. Why didn't Maddie offer Sonic Spinball just for good luck?
I don't know. Yeah, traditionally Maddie would offer Sonic Spinball as a good luck offer to everyone else, but if anybody that's not familiar, Star Ocean 2. I don't think we need to talk about this too much, but this is a game to always keep an eye on. It's just a little long, but it is the most popular game in the series. KOTOR is a deferral. Which one is the deferral?
KOTOR 2. 90% no dev tools.
So congrats. Stardew Valley, keep an eye on this. The length of this is a little strange, but this is like an extremely random run, if I remember correctly. So
yeah, there's all kinds of different ways that you can go. There are things you can do to make it consistent to a certain degree, but there's just too many things that can go wrong or right.
Yeah. So, but regardless, this is a mega game right now. So 55 minutes of Stardew Valley is probably worth doing. SteamWorld Quest is a deferral. So again, congrats. Hello.
Bullshit. I get to be the one to say it.
Yeah, this is a video game. This is in some form.
You don't say.
I will say, I believe Kios offered the wrong difficulty name. Kios doesn't have a time in action, and action isn't.
Action's like 2.5 hours.
It's 2.5 hours for the record. So I believe this is basically the same category as Angelus's.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, do they want to do easy or do they want to do hard? I don't know. I'll be totally honest. Both have their merits. I love the hard mode run of this game. I think it's super cool, but I'm biased. Shocker.
If they can go, honestly, I do think they're going to take this run in some capacity. It just depends on their if we can spare the time, we would gladly take hard just for the category name on the stream alone.
I don't even know about that. I'm not gonna. There's a lot of inherent bias on this one, so I'm not gonna even predict which way they're gonna lean. I like my offer, but I also like the any % story glitchless offer. Both are very, very solid.
When
watches.
I see a higher difficulty on a game that's described as Souls-like or just an action RPG in general, I get a little bit more curious.
Exactly. I've heard the strats, in just reviewing the runs, the strats vary a little bit, and the burden of execution is higher on hard.
They're different runs.
The other, the other thing that makes me say I think this gets in, it has the name Final Fantasy in it. It's relatively new, and I'm not sure what Final Fantasies in the last decade have had kind of the Halo effect for this game. There's 14 post Heavensward, there's 7 remake, and then this. I don't know any game that has captivated the Final Fantasy fandom as much as this since apart from those other two, which those one's an MMO and the other was submitted to this event already.
And if nothing else, go right on the power of chaos memes, because God forbid those will be pouring in donation comments if it gets in.
Oh yes. That'll be all over. So we don't need to talk much more about this one. I think
If
this
you're
one
watching
gets
this,
in.
if you're watching this stream, you know this run because you've seen me do it. So, Suikoden 2. Again, it's a little longer and it's so hard to top how good this was when it was done previously.
That said, it has been 6 years, so I do see this one having a good chance to get into a limit break. It's fighting for hours with other runs, and deferrals make space a lot more compact. But do keep, like, if you don't see this one get into this event, keep offering, 'cause I do think this one will get in again fairly soon. Suikoden 1, actually, the last in-person limit break, had surprising legs on YouTube. I think it was like top 5 most watched VODs from last in-person limit break.
Interesting. Yeah. I would love to just be able to go like on the back end of the YouTube on Limit Break and see the sources on some of these, the runs, see what like the it'd be fascinating to look at because it's really
You
interesting.
get a
to go and look
backdoor
at.
entrance to that freaking YouTube channel, and Google just has a field day. I'm certain.
I love data. Like looking at data is so interesting to me. Continuing on, we talked about Super Pape
Please take it.
before.
There's one personal request on this. Please take it.
Taskbot was in. We talked about that already. Tales of Berseria. If there's a personal request for this one, take this one.
I'm doubling. I'm doubling that. Please take this.
This run is awesome. This is such a cool speed run.
Yeah, this has got the entire group's approval for this one. Please take this run.
Tales of Arise came out last year, and it was the best-selling game in the series in a long time. So, like, I do know that there's interest in the series
because they did the stupid thing of making a sequel to Hysteria. Why?
It was so much better than this.
But why would you make your best game in the series since freaking Vesperia, and you make it a sequel to like the least liked game in series history?
Well, there's a nerd in me that is screaming, "It's a prequel, you moron!"
Oh, it's so good. I adore this game. This game is so good. And the run is really cool too. So like, you even get that. Take this run. Don't even. Don't second guess it. Just take this one.
Please.
Let's see. Continuing on, Final Fantasy Legend. Most notable thing here. This is a very easy staff backup. Noted by the name. Trails. This is a deferred run. Be interesting to see how they handle this because I believe all the runners are looking to run remote. 2 of them live close enough to do it in person remote, but that means that like if they're doing it.
No. Beef and Stolda will be at Limit Break itself if barring unforeseen circumstances.
Gotcha.
It's Captain who lives all the way in like southern Australia.
Gotcha. Okay.
There would have to be a scene transition to do this remotely. This is one of the few games that is possible because the save files, you just make sure you have the save file loaded up, like pulled up on a folder, and you can drag it into Discord, send it to the other runner, and they can take that leg of the relay.
Yeah. So it's possible. I'd be interested. That's one that the committee's got to figure out the logistics for, but it's in. So congrats. Just gonna note, Twilight Princess. Probably, if it didn't have the Zelda name, would actually be one to consider. We talk about it with Zelda 2 a lot, but they kind of don't take Zelda because Zelda gets into GDQ perpetually, and they just don't. It doesn't need a showcase here.
Yeah, they're gonna, and I will be legitimately upset if they take that before freaking Zelda 2.
Pete Dorr, fantastic runner. This run was already accepted, so it's a deferral. Same for Magic of Sherazade. Shadow of Azurbius. This is a weird video game. I've never heard of it. Apparently, it's an old MMO from like the 80s.
Early 90s.
Yeah, and early MMO in the very sense that it's not a perpetual online game like what we're familiar with modern ones today. It's a very different beast, and as such, that has a bunch of single-player content you technically can do still.
Regardless, this is a 4-player co-op offer. You don't reject these that often, and it's got a bunch of names that just get runs in, especially of this type, like if you look at it. So, Continuing on, we've talked about. I guess, do you want to talk about SD3 remake?
Yes. So this was kind of one. The Trials of Mana remake was, unlike Secret of Mana, generally considered to be really good. I think the issue with this one was the difficulty. Most people said that even the hard mode of the base game was too easy, so they did finally add like an even harder difficulty that finally satisfied people. The beginner run, if you're taking it more for movement and like tricks, which I know that there's at least a few of them. There's still a few skips in beginner and glitchless. Oh yeah, I have housemates. I'll have to talk quieter. I do know that there's still like tricks and stuff, but a lot of this game like resembles a modern Ys is the weird thing. And I think it kind of loses out to the number of other mana offers there are, and also just it's 3 hours, so it's a bit long. It's on the easiest difficulty, so it's something I could see them taking. I'm just not predicting it.
Yep. Continuing on, Triangle Strategy is all New Game Plus offers, so for now, I'm just going to leave them off our predictions.
If there was one, I would see it being New Game Plus Hard True Ending. Just, again, like, New Game Plus very easy. The kind of sounds like a double whammy of just steamrolling the game.
Yeah. Ultima, I believe 2 and 6 were 4 and 6 were deferred.
4 and 6 were deferred, which... Yeah, there's offers of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And
like,
I don't think they
like
take...
to do the whole trilogy.
I don't think they do. I don't think they do beyond those, because that's already like 2 games that are, and one of them is like almost 2 hours. It's not like a series of like 30-minute runs back to back. So that does start to take up enough of a chunk in the schedule. But again, this is a series that there's historically been a dearth of submissions. So if we don't see one of these added to this event, I think there's a good chance these get into the next event, and if not this one.
Continuing on, Valkyria Chronicles is a deferral, so it's automatically in. Wild Arms, this is a strange one. We've got it marked as a deferral, but it's technically a different category than was originally offered. I still think you just take it, because the new category is shorter as well, so...
yeah, we counted this one as a deferral. The category is fairly different, but I think they would still take it.
Yeah, it's probably close enough to still count.
Yeah, and even then, they might just look at it and say, "Oh, it's shorter. Oh, great, we'll take it."
Yeah. Willow is a deferral. We get to Xenoblade, or Xeno in general. Probably is just a better way of going about this. X is a deferral, so they were taking Xenoblade X guaranteed.
Yep.
The question then is, Xenoblade 3 did just come out. Did we try to sneak in a second Xeno?
So I'll actually we'll start on Xenoblade. I think that of the Chronicles games, the one I'd lean most heavily into is 2, because that's the most recent one of the bunch, like in terms of like full release. Torna they did take at Limit Break 2019, so that's probably a no. The 2 route has changed significantly since Bowie ran it. This would be on the DLC category, I believe. So it's like I could see them doing it. I also don't know that they reached to do it. There is Definitive Edition New Game Plus, which it's a really really janky New Game Plus on the Definitive Edition, but there's some interesting stuff to it. They did have it open one of the Questing for Glories, and then Future Connected, which is it's pretty short, so like you could tweak that one in as well.
I still wouldn't be shocked even if they don't take another one, seeing like Future Connected on the backup list. Like it's just short. Especially if they have a run by one of the runners somewhere else, it's very easy to just kind of sneak a 40-minute run on the backups.
Or even maybe somehow throw it in as an incentive. There could be all kinds of different ways this can go.
Yeah, there's Xenogears. I am kind of surprised because I never expected somebody would offer this, apart from maybe Connor Cordell when he was submitting. And he doesn't. I don't think he speedruns anymore. 14.5 hours. That would set a new record by 4 hours. I'm not predicting this one, but you shoot your shot. This game, I know people really like it, and I just wanted to comment on it because I see it in the submissions, and I'm like, hell yeah.
And
and
then
then
lastly,
Xenosaga 1 and 3.
yeah, hilariously, 2 was offered and taken for 2020, and 2 was not reoffered, so they can go either way on this one if they wanted to have a Xenosaga. And I like 1 just because it's probably more played. It's a little shorter, but
Yeah, one is the most popular of the 3. I know some people say 3 is the best game of the series, but it's also really obscure. Like, it's hard to get. It's not, and like 2, I think is not as well liked, but it has like some really interesting speed tech. But again, it's not as well liked, so 3 ended up being kind of shafted in terms of sales. So of the 3, like 1 is the most accessible, and it's also the shortest. So I could see them taking that one. That honestly, I think, was one of the last runs I left on my sheet that I actually did end up taking. So I see 1 getting in. Personally, I wouldn't be shocked if there was any of the Xenoblades in its place, but we'll see.
Hey, GK.
I don't
Yes.
have much faith in either of these.
It's time to call a friend.
I summon you.
Yo, nerds.
This game is so cool. I love that this game exists. I have no attachment to Yakuza. That is awesome.
Game fucking rules. I
It
commented
was
this.
just in GDQ.
It's also been on like both of the last questing for glories. So that's not to say I think it's heavily considered, but it's like if they feel like any game on this like list is submitted is like needing a showcase, it's not quite this one, but if you put it in, it'll raise money. You got a guaranteed marathon like ace with Froob. He's very, very good at what he does. It's just the series is peaking in popularity. Like a Dragon 2 was announced not long ago, so this would be just a good take in general.
Yep.
I have this one on my list, and I am very much biased.
I don't mind the bias for it, but
Fucking video games.
continuing on, we've got this Y''S series.
Yeah, there's a lot of E's here, and 1 and 2 were put on the backup list for Limit Break 2020. I could see them just squeaking it in on the backup list for this one. We're open to still doing the relay race or just any of the categories separately. We'll see how that goes. The weird thing is they're kind of competing with Trails in the Sky among Falcom games, which I personally find they do different things, so I don't necessarily agree with that assertion. However, like I could see how that would come into play. And then East Origin, I got that in many years ago. It's kind of like a fringe. I can literally just pull this run out, like having not done runs in months, and still get it under estimate. East 7, Turbo. It's this is a very glitchy East 7 run. They finally broke this game. I'm not as big a fan of what Turbo does for this run. In terms of combat, what it does for skips is really cool. So Seto was just done, and East 9. We broke the crap out of this game, so it's under an hour consistently. So that's one I'm probably saying of my own submissions. It's the one that I have the most hope for.
I generally agree, but probably not too much more to talk about with that. Especially because, like I said, it's a little hard. Generally, it's nice to try to avoid bias. It's kind of hard to avoid bias for games that either one of us has a direct stake in. So.
That's why I suggest next year we do this alphabetically in reverse so we can get the bias out of Akumo right out of the gate. Get it out.
And then Zelda 2. Again, if this didn't have the Zelda name, it would 100% be in. But because it has the Zelda name, it gets into GDQ, which means that it's not super likely to show up.
Which I find it's a crying shame because I actually really like this game a lot, despite it being the quote-unquote black sheep of the series.
And that's all the submissions. It's an interesting list. Like I said, there's a lot of interesting restrictions that end up kind of getting put into it. Just because of, again, you kind of have to build the schedule to the deferred list from last event rather than being able to kind of say, like, okay, here's our keynote game, here's what we want for this. You kind of have to build around this, like, other schedule. It's very interesting. I'm very curious to see what it ends up coming out of it. I do have a full GK, and I have lists that we've kind of made. We always do it. Where we predict our own.
And we make a bet, and the loser has to shame themselves on Twitter.
So it should be interesting to see how that all goes. I will either put those out on Twitter or something later if you guys are curious to see what my personal predictions list was. GK can do the same. Actually, let me see if I can just put this into Pastebin right now.
I mean, I dropped my Pastebin in.
Let's see. I'll just copy this from Google Sheets into Pastebin and have it work. Close enough. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the disclaimer as well off of the thing. Just append this to the top of the sheet.
And again, we don't have access to information like remote runs, so if that's factored into the event, like they only want to do certain amount of remote runs, certain amount of remote run hours, that could change the schedule significantly. We don't necessarily know, because somebody from, Brazil or Chile or England, would want to actually attend in person, would look at their name on SRCom, think, I think this might be a remote runner, and then they actually show up in person. Or we see, a runner from, Nevada that wants to submit remotely.
Yeah.
Despite that being probably about as close as you can get to Utah itself without being in Utah.
Yeah. Again, this is going to be the first live in-person event for RPG Limit Break since 2019, so we're going to see how it goes. It's going to be a year of whether or not they're going to stick to their guns and do what they know best, or they're going to try and push themselves in new ways now that they've had a couple years to kind of like sit back and think about what they want to do, like what is the future. Yeah.
If anybody's curious, this is my personal predictions list. Should be sorted alphabetically or close to it. But yeah, do you guys have any other closing thoughts? Anything else? Anything that's burning other than saying take Tales of Berseria?
Please take Tales of Berseria.
Take Tales of Berseria.
And
What was the other run? What was the other run too before it?
I mean, for me, it's Ryza, but
Super Paid.
Super Paid.
Super Paid.
Yeah, Super Paid.
I have three back-to-back: Stranger Paradise, Super Paid, and Tales of Berseria. I'm not even a Tales fan, and I'm like, please. I'm not even like a Tales fan, and I'm like, please take Berseria.
I say you actually don't like Tales. Like,
I like Berseria.
It's a good video game. But yeah, I think that's probably going to wrap it up. So let's go ahead and do the final split.